Hello, everyone. I'm here today to recover and review the seventh studio album by Lana Del Rey, Chemtrails Over the Country Club. It was just released this past Friday, March 19th. I've already reviewed her newest, her singles, Let Me Love You Like a Woman, which was released back in October. And then I also reviewed the title track, Chemtrails Over the Country Club, when it came out in January. So I'll link those in the description, where I will go a little bit more into depth into those particular songs. Album number 7. Lana has definitely kept busy over the years. She is nearly a decade into her career. As of this coming fall, it will be 10 years since video games came out, and then also Born to Die, which is a big milestone for her. And so dropping, seven albums in 10 years is, I would say, pretty good amount. Not too much, but also definitely not too little. And of course, her last album, Norman F. and Rockwell, came out in late summer of 2019 and got rave reviews. It was really a landmark album for her. I mean, it was a centerpiece album. It was a magnum opus, so to speak. And it was one of my favorites. And although, I've always been a Lana Del Rey fan since way before that album, and I actually personally am still a fan of other albums that some people kind of don't think are nearly as strong. But Norman was a triumph. I think we can all agree. And not long after that album was released, she was like, hey, I've got another one coming in the pipeline, and it's going to be called White Hot Forever, and it's going to come out next year. And I was a little bit like, okay, Lana, like, you just gave us like a 14-song album, like, maybe, I don't know, just like give us a little bit more space, like wait a little over a year at least. And so a year came, and of course we've had the pandemic and everything. I don't know if that had a lot to do with why the album didn't come out originally when she said it was, which was going to be back last September, a year after Norman. But it's come out a little bit later, a year and a half, which is a little bit more of a breathing room for the era. And I appreciate that. Because like I said, I don't like when artists put out albums too close together, especially an album that really deserves to have like a real era with like some real space around it for that appreciation, so that we don't move on too quickly from it. But I must admit, I was kind of nervous thinking, well, all right, is she going to be able to give us the same level of quality and something that the general public even is going to gravitate towards so quickly after this album? It was just setting a standard that was pretty high. Whereas I think in the past, I don't think people outside of Lana Del Rey fans really expected a whole lot from her, so it was sort of easy to just enjoy it for what it was, not saying that Ultraviolence didn't also get really rave critical reviews as well. That album is considered by critics. It's a debate between Ultraviolence and Norman, what her best album is to date so far. I'm more on the Norman side, but I appreciate that Ultraviolence is also glorious. I'm just more of a Honeymoon stan, and everyone thinks that's her worst album, so I'm in that rare minority there. But with all that being said, I really do think that Chemtrails, being a shorter album, it's her shortest album she's ever given us. It's only 11 songs. Unless you count Paradise, which was an EP. But that kind of feels like it's attached to Born to Die, to be honest. I think of them as the same album. This is her shortest album, not EP, that she has given us. And I don't know how I feel about how short it is. We did just get another album recently, so it doesn't feel like we're starving for content from her. But at the same time, I feel like the concept of Chemtrails Over the Country Club, which was an album title that she revealed to us last summer, amongst some dubious controversy, which I've covered a lot extensively in my past 2 Lana Del Rey track reviews, where I've reviewed Let Me Love You Like a Woman and Chemtrails, the song. So I don't want to harp so much on the controversies that she's been embroiled in, particularly within the last year on social media, just because I'm tired of talking about it. But I think most of you know what I'm talking about. She has on social media, particularly on Instagram, made some statements that are very dubious about race and about the music industry and about women in music. Things where it's just like, Lana, if you could have just sat there and ate your food, we would have loved you forever. And I did see one person on a screenshot of a review on like Amazon Music or something, and it was someone saying, well, if Lana being a horrific demon lady on social media, Instagram and Twitter, is the price we have to pay for really good music from her, then I guess we have to pay it. Because there's been, a quality to her music that we've gotten in more recent years. But especially after listening to Chemtrails, I can agree, it's sort of like, as her music gets better, her online presence gets more, it gets more Karen-like, and that's unfortunate. I wanted to defend her against a lot of stuff, in one of the more recent videos I made, because one of the things that's really inexcusable, and I still have no clue what she was thinking, was the mesh mask controversy. And again, I don't want to harp too much on it, but this was last fall. She was at a book signing for her poetry book. Keep in mind, this girl has been busy. She put out a poetry book last summer, which I still haven't read. I should be canceled for that by Lana Stans. I'm so, so sorry. I really should read that. I don't want to spend the money. Oh my God. Anyway, but that being said, she claims that there's plastic underneath that mask. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to guess believe her. I'm not thinking, you put plastic over your mouth, like how much can you breathe through that? It's not like fabric where you can let some air in. Now, granted, obviously there's going to be space for air to come in. A lot of people, and myself included, I mean, when I wear masks, they're not the tightest fitting masks, so there is a lot of room for things to come in from particularly the top. And so she could breathe through that, I guess, but someone put out that that's going to suffocate you. You can't wear plastic over your mouth like that and your nose. It'd be harder to breathe. It would make it really hard to breathe. So her claim that there's mesh under there is just BS. I really have to see through that. And I have no idea why she's trying to spin that. She just owned it and said, you know what, it was like a dumb decision. But she doubled down on that and then doesn't want to talk about it anymore. And it's like, look, the controversy over what she said online, the stuff about the music industry, I know where she's coming from. Should not have worded it the way she did, but and I still don't really defend it, but it's like, okay, whatever, I'll just listen to the music and forget about it. But the mesh mask thing was something where I was like, there was a moment where I was just like, oh my gosh, is this going to make me not listen to her music anymore? Because there's just certain ties in with what's going on politically and things going on in this country that is just inexcusable. And so we draw a line, we draw a line. Now, of course, the mesh mask is very aesthetically beautiful. She wears it a ton in her music video. That's fine. The music video probably had social distancing, the camera crew wearing proper masks, hopefully, all of that. But in a public book signing in closed quarters indoors, no. Not acceptable. Even now, even as a lot of us are getting vaccinated. But anyway, all of that preamble aside, Lana has been trying us with social media. But I was actually kind of worried that this album was going to be delayed because of the drama, because there has been no promo for this at all. I didn't see, we had the singles, and then we saw the albums coming in March, and then she didn't say a damn thing about it in the weeks preceding to this day. And so I was like, is this album still coming? Because it's not really being, talked about as much. When Norman was coming out, she was dropping tons of promo tracks, and there was more going on. And so I don't know, it's probably because of COVID, but it's also just maybe she just doesn't care. And she's maybe realizing that maybe she should not be on social media so much. But we didn't get a whole lot of fanfare, but the album is still here. And you know what? I can sort of understand her with this album, just wanting to drop it and let people interpret it as they want, not over-explain it, not make all these posts about it. She'll have the music videos. She did drop a music video for White Dress just the day before. Which is the first track on the album, so I will talk about that in a second. I will say I am one of the few people who will defend the album cover, even though, again, the whole thing she waded into, no one asked, but she had to bring up race when talking about how many Black people were in the album cover, which, is something that I think a lot of people might be kind of questioning, is why is the one Black person who's visibly Black, sitting so far in the back? The white women are more prominent. Things like this, but she's like, I have a very diverse friend group, blah, 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 whatever. But I mean, as far as the whole aesthetic she's going for, which is this 1950s suburban country club aesthetic, I get it. I get where she's coming from. The white pearls, the 50s hairstyle, the Corvette, I get it. So I wasn't sure exactly how much she was going to be glamorizing this lifestyle in this album or how much she was going to be, and I kind of assumed that she would, be cautionary tailing it. In this album, she's speaking a lot about fame, something that she hasn't sung about so much in this explicit of a way since Born to Die, which is interesting because, she's been kind of an artist now for quite some time in the mainstream spotlight, but she's also in the indie scene, and I feel like she's not necessarily at the, level of celebrity scrutiny as a lot of other pop stars. She kind of keeps her personal life pretty private, and she, seems to sort of do her own thing and like kind of, and she sounds like she's very happy. And people, I think she said in an interview, this is meant to be her happiest album, like her most, like making it and just like the nature of the songs. Like this is her at like every album, she feels like she's getting closer to the music she wants to make. And this is the closest she's gotten to just her, unencumbered soul. And I feel that with the music. I feel that with the stylistic choices she's making and the experimental choices, particularly vocally, that I find very interesting. Keep in mind, I have not listened to an extensive amount of her back catalog as Lizzie Grant, all of those demos and unreleased songs. I've heard some of them, but this first track on the record called White Dress, a lot of people are aptly saying is very Lizzie Grant, very, 2010, like that era. Before she was famous, and she sings about this in very directly in the lyrics. Back when she was a waitress wearing a white dress, she felt like a god. She really, she went to the Men in Music conference, which the way she sings it so quickly is like the music conference, and it sounds like the Metamucil conference to me. It's like, what are you saying? It took me a minute. I had to look at the lyrics. She's wondering if it would have been better if she'd never gone down this path of being a more prolific singer-songwriter in the mainstream eye. If she could have just stayed writing songs, but in a very sort of like indie scene where like she didn't have the press and the paparazzi, though. I don't know necessarily how, after watching the Britney documentary, I don't know necessarily, especially at this point in her career, how much she's hounded by paparazzi. But then again, she is kind of like an A-list singer in this current age. So, I mean, she was nominated for Album of the Year at the Grammys. So, like, you kind of have to accept that, like, yeah, she is probably that famous. She talks about how the color white symbolizes purity. I actually thought that white dress was going to have something to do with a wedding dress. That's, I think, what most people would assume. But no, she's talking about just like a simple white waitress uniform. Summer sizzling, listening to jazz out on the lawn, listening to White Stripes when they were white hot, listening to rock all day long. I mean, this is exactly how I envisioned Lana before the fame. She's kind of like just hanging out with guys and flirting, writing songs, trying to get noticed, going to these different conferences and going to these different, venues. And, she's probably, yeah, very happy and very content at that time, especially looking back. Vocally, she does something quite unique, which is this very, I don't know how to describe it, but raspy, high delivery that can be very hurried at times and very unsyncopated, where it definitely feels improvised. There's a level of like, this was a decision she made in the studio without really thinking about it. It was just like, this is where I just feel like the music's taking me. And it wasn't really planned. It's not for everyone. I see a lot of people who are like turned off by that. And it's definitely not, her most pure, projected, pristine vocal delivery. But it's unique and I appreciate it for that. I think that, sonically, this song is the one that leaves the most to be desired for me. Because it's the first song on the record, I feel like because it sets the mood, I give it a pass because I'm not bored of it by that point. If this song had followed way further down in the track listing, I think I would have been like, I don't know. This is just so meandering, and it's not like the melody is not really jumping out at you. I'm having a hard time getting into it. But because it's the opener, I give it a little bit of a pass because it's a vibe setter. It's taking you to that time and place, 10 years ago for Lana, where her inspirations came from for her music. But yeah, melodically, it probably is one of my least favorites of the record, and definitely not a highlight track for me. Although I understand why she decided to give it a music video. I think it's really interesting that she sings so much about fame, and on other tracks she does this as well. She sings a lot about fame, understandably. There's been some huge shifts in her life in the last decade. But she talks about how I wish I could go back to that simpler time, and I get the nostalgia. I really do. But, and I'll maybe say this on a few other tracks more, I don't really understand, like, coming from someone who hasn't made it yet, and I don't know if I'm ever gonna make it. It's like, I'm not trying to, be presumptuous here and say that that's gonna happen for me. But I look at Lana and all of the money that she has and all of the resources and freedom that she has, especially after putting out 7 albums in 10 years. She could not work for quite some time and just sort of happily go and live anywhere she wants. And, in other tracks, she sings about like wanting to go to Arkansas and wanting to go and explore all these other places in the country and live at these other places and live a much more normal life. And I do understand that, like, yeah, she's never going to be anonymous like she was before. And so I, to be fair, shouldn't be, acting like, oh my God, how can she act like she doesn't have like everything she could possibly want right now? And that she should actually be a lot happier where she is right now than when she was back then. I get nostalgia. Hindsight, you always look at things through rose-colored glasses. You probably were pretty unhappy back then, but it doesn't look like that now because you're unhappy still today. Money doesn't solve everything. Fame doesn't solve everything. Goodness gracious, we all know that. But a recurring theme on this record does leave me questioning, Lana can really go off the grid. She can really live anywhere she wants. She can live in Tulsa, Oklahoma if she wants to. She can, she can do anything. And it sort of sounds like she's kind of confined. Like she's coming from the perspective of like, I'm confined to LA and I'm confined to this like mansion where there's paparazzi outside 24/7. It makes me think of Britney with her conservatorship. Where Lana's not really under that same kind of level of like, first of all, scrutiny, but also that specific situation. And so I do kind of wonder, I'm just like, if Lana is truly happy right now, I hope she appreciates that as well. That like, looking back, I get the whole nostalgia to being younger and maybe like feeling a little bit less, depressed because as you grow older, you learn things, just things get harder sometimes as you get older. They can also get easier and better. With wisdom comes maturity, but there's things about being young. I get it. I'm 100% there. But the whole pre-fame versus now, I mean, I don't know. It's maybe coming from my perspective a little hard to relate to. That's all I'm going to say about that. And that is a very prevalent theme on this record. So the title track, I've already talked a lot about it. All I will say is that we have this grandiose image conjured up by the title, which is very specific. Chemtrails over the Country Club. That is probably one of the most loaded titles I have heard in quite some time for an album, and I love it because of it. Lana has some of the best album titles of the modern day. Where I feel like album titling is a bit of a lost art. I feel like especially in pop music, people don't really think a whole lot about album titles anymore. They're sort of just repeating the same phrases, or they're just picking a song they like and using that. They're not really thinking about like a title that, even if a song does share it on the album, that like really gets you thinking, is really poetic and unique. Potentially something that no author has ever come up with before. And Lana's one of those modern artists that are still kind of somewhat pop who does that. I mean, there's a lot of indie artists who are doing that, but they're not anywhere near mainstream. And so I really appreciate that. And I'm not necessarily saying the title leaves a little bit more to be desired, but I guess I feel like that title could honestly be alluding to so much of her work, not just on this record. And I feel like that title almost makes me think more of albums like Born to Die, because this is such a suburban feeling record. Well, the title and the imagery, not so much the Sonics. The Sonics is very country folk, which is, different. It's a little different. I guess maybe Honeymoon, or an album like Honeymoon or something, Lust for Life. Those albums feel a little bit more aptly titled Chemtrails over the Country Club. But I totally get it. It just feels like there's a little bit more to be desired. And I wonder if that's just because there's not enough songs on this record. Maybe if she put 2 or 3 more, would have helped, tie this whole picture together, especially since one of the songs is a cover of a Joni Mitchell song. But I love Chemtrails. I love the allusions to the Zodiac and being wild and free, seeing that through line through her fame that she just wants, and as I tried to realize, she's not really glamorizing the 1950s suburban picket fence lifestyle. She's singing about how you can't tame her with that. I do have to point out, one of my favorite reviewers on YouTube, John from AR TV, he's not such a big Lana Del Rey fan. He made a really hilarious analogy to what it feels like to listen to Lana and singing about these types of tropes and topics in her music, which he's not a huge fan of, which I understand, to each his own. Describing how it feels a little bit like being trapped by a, very privileged white Karen type woman taking you to the swim club or the country club. And, she's taking the long way there, and you're kind of like just listening to her drone on and on about her best friends at the hair salon and her connections at the elementary school and like all these things. You don't care because you're 10 years old and you just want to play with Jimmy and Tommy at the soccer field. You don't care about these white moms chattering about their suburban, housewife lives. And I feel like, it was just kind of funny how he kind of related a lot of these lyrics and the way the songs kind of meander to that. And I understand where he's coming from, but that's Lana's aesthetic. That's Lana's aesthetic. Because these lyrics are, in this whole album, some of her most personal in a way that's like so anecdotal that like, if you're not her friend, you're not going to get it. You're not going to understand what she's talking about. Tulsa Jesus Freak. Alrighty. When I saw that title, I was like, damn, we are going to be in for a ride on this song. I had no idea what to expect, but it makes you think in your mind of like, okay, I'm thinking dive bar. I'm thinking like Dolly Parton, but like even more country, like over the top banjos. Like we're sort of also getting a little bit of that like faux patriotic, like the song from Lust for Life, the national anthem song that she inverts to be very feminist. I forget what it's called right now. I'm sorry, my two brain cells are really struggling right now. You know the song I'm talking about. She's like, God bless America and all the women in it. That sort of song. I was thinking we were going to get something along those lines, with a bit of a political undertone because she's mentioning Jesus and Tulsa. Interestingly, the name White Hot Forever comes from this song, which she shouts out during the bridge or post-chorus, which is one of my favorite parts of the song. I think this was one of the first songs that she wrote for this album, notwithstanding a few songs that were from a couple eras before. We'll talk about that. You should stay real close to Jesus. Keep that bottle at your hand, my man. Find your way back to my bed again. Sing me like a Bible hymn. We should go back to Arkansas. She pronounced it Arkansas, not Arkansas. Trade this body for the can of gin, like a little piece of heaven. No more candle in the wind. Goodness gracious, Elton John should be getting paid so much royalties for the amount of time she mentions Candle in the Wind, not just on this song, but on a ton of songs on this record, and on previous songs like Mariner's Apartment Complex and such. She picks out just like so many pop culture moments from the 20th century in such a kaleidoscopic way. I find it so interesting. This song lyrically feels to me just like so much of a idea that she ran with about a place that she could escape with her lover. A themed kind of slice of Americana that isn't really appealing to my sensibility. I just think of racism when I think of, Southern communities, Southern highly religious communities like that. But, I can see the appeal. It's an aesthetic. It's an aesthetic for sure. And it's one it's fun to play with musically. To be honest, I was impressed with how esoteric this song becomes in its production, in the reverb that she applies to this, which I thought we were going to get a very stripped back, faux country style song. We do get some guitars coming in. That's a theme throughout all of this. Jack Antonoff's production, very similar to NFR, even more understated. You can tell that Lana's really trying to play with how little instruments she can introduce and how much she can rely on her voice, which I kind of get it. I see her stripping it all back, and I get that. Such a romantic melody. I mean, it's really evocative of like other songs of hers that are so orchestrally romantic and swelling. Some of my favorite songs of hers, like 13 Beaches or Blue Jeans, these really cinematic songs. And I wasn't expecting something like this from it. Such a, dirt and gritty title. But I think that's the beauty of Lana, is that she always kind of flips the script and juxtaposes, very heavy-handed, gritty titles with light and airy and wheat fields in the sunset, running in a white dress, kind of romantic feelings, like Tuck Everlasting, like Nicholas Sparks. It gives you that vibe. I'm all here for it. One of my favorite songs on the record, Let Me Love You Like a Woman. You know, I think that this is probably my least favorite song on this album. I think it's the most bland and generic. She, when it came out, said it was her favorite from the new project. So that's a little questionable because it's just such a simplistic song. It's not necessarily bad, but it's just in the context of 7 albums deep, we have heard this before, you know, in a much stronger presence of a song. And I feel like this song is easy to fall asleep to and just sort of like vibe with. It's just an album filler. Okay, it was the lead single. Okay, this album doesn't really have any specific song that screams lead single, so I totally get why she chose it. There's no song that's like that for radio or anything, but you know, it's simplistically in the melody, it's like I okay, yeah, I mean, I do appreciate, you know, it sets the stage of her saying she wants to leave LA with her partner. Girl, I get it. You know, I would get fed up with LA too. It's beautiful weather, but you know, all of that. Um, and again, it pours into this whole sort of just like, I just want to be an authentically free woman, kind of the general theme of lots of her work, but particularly this record. Wild at Heart. I really love this song. Going in the country direction for the first time on this record very overtly, and I really appreciate it. And it's got some melodies that I was like, that sounds familiar. So there's a melody reference to Love Song. Um, that reminds me a bit of that song when she's singing, "If I had to do it all again, I would, because in the end you brought me here to you." So a bit of a melodic throwback to Love Song. And then we have a melodic reference to "Hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me." The cameras, their flashes, the cars, their car crashes. I think those are the lyrics. I might have gotten that wrong, but that cascading note line, direct rip off of that song. But you know what? You know what? Her retreading past melodies, I'm not going to have a hissy fit over. Does it feel a little uninspired sometimes? Okay. A lot of people complain that her songs all sound the same. So, okay, I guess they have a legitimate gripe with this song. But the main chorus, "'Cause I'm wild, wild, wild at heart," I think we can say that that's original enough for her and the real selling point for the song for me, because it's just a really great, you know, put your arms around your friends and just sway back and forth kind of melody. It just really sells at home, especially when she layers her vocals towards the end of the song. We're hearing a side to her we've not heard before with this distinctly country sound, and the vocal layering is aptly done. It really aided this song in elevating it, because the whole song feels like it's building on a crescendo. It starts out subtle and kind of just grows and grows into a big stadium filling kind of crowd pleaser type song. "What would I do if I told you you made me crazy to see your pretty pics on Sunset Boulevard? And it makes me lazy, so I smoke cigarettes just to understand the smog." You know, someone else who sings a lot about smog, speaking of Joni Mitchell, this is I feel like, you know, I feel like Lana Del Rey is always going to be trying with all of her albums to recreate for the modern era the Ladies of the Canyon album by Joni Mitchell, which is such an iconic record. Because all of her albums, there's just so much, especially her recent ones, so much linking back to Joni. The more I've listened to Joni in recent years, it's become very apparent. And Joni sings about smog so much, which I find just really interesting. I mean, it's very true. Los Angeles, covered in smog, even today. And also, I like the, you know, allusion to like seeing pretty pictures on potentially Instagram, kind of giving you a feeling of inspiration, but at the same time, like, it makes you kind of depressed because you're just like, oh, your life is so perfect, and it makes me kind of lazy and just want to smoke cigarettes. It's sort of like how I feel when I look at pretty, you know, people like working out on Instagram, and I'm just like, you know, this just makes me want to eat Fritos and lay in bed all day. Like, at the same time, it's motivating, but it's also not, because it's like, oh, it makes me feel so shitty about myself. Oh no, I love you lots like polka dots. That lyric to me is a bit juvenile. I've got to be honest with you. It's an interesting rhyme, but nothing else. Then "coffee pots and Insta thoughts." I didn't even catch that. I'm just looking at the lyrics now. Wow, I didn't even catch that. That's pretty interesting. The way she's trashing LA, I'm living for it. I'm living for it. "Dark, but just a game." This is a meditation on fame that is not really a novel concept for artists, especially artists like Lana, female artists, to sing about the rise and fall, the Marilyn Monroe complex in society and in Hollywood. So to be honest, I'm a little tired of hearing about it sung because I don't really think that Lana, people say the song is very interesting melodically. It is. I like the allusion, the way that she is using interesting metaphors to twist the narrative of fame and also kind of give it the big middle finger, and saying, "You're not going to change me. That this stuff isn't going to happen to me," which is important. It's just a very important thing to take away and remind yourself, especially as you're 10 years into your career. It's a perfectly nice song for me. It doesn't really stand out. We've just got some smooth guitars, a nice rhythm coming in with the percussion to just give it a nice vibe. And it's just easygoing. But it's also a bit ominous, in the way she's delivering things. We're not going so high in a register and we're just sort of brooding on a context. But it definitely has grown on me with future listens. Not all who wander are lost. I believe that this quote was popularized by one of my favorite authors, J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't know if he necessarily coined that phrase, but I love that she's running with it. This is the most stripped back song on the record. This sounds like a demo, one take, raw, unencumbered, unfiltered vocal. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on it because of that. But it just showcases her gorgeous high tone, her lofty soprano. I think it's just a really great Americana melody. It's very simplistic lyrically, the context of just let us have our wild days and be a free spirit. It doesn't mean that we're a lost cause, that, just because you might not appear to have a direction doesn't necessarily have to mean something negative. I mean, goodness gracious, if I had the money and the resources, I would look completely wayward. I'd be just like going anywhere I whims wanted me to go. So yeah, not all those who wander are lost. It's just wanderlust. And there's something sacred about that. Yosemite, when I saw that this song was on the track list, I got very excited because Lana Del Rey fans will know that this was a song that we originally found out about when Lust for Life came out. It was supposed to be for that record, but she said that it was too happy. I kind of get where she's coming from with that. Lust for Life is a pretty heavy record in parts, I guess mostly. So then we all thought it would be on NFR, and we were disappointed when it wasn't. But she has now put it on Chemtrails 4 years later, 4 years and change, because she probably wrote it years before that. This is one of the few songs on the record that Jack Antonoff didn't produce. I will say I had a lot of expectation for this song, just given the grandiose nature of its title and thinking about how Lana Del Rey could take a romantic concept or image of like the iconic scenery of Yosemite. I'm thinking, Ansel Adams, epic sweeping vistas. I see her running with that and giving us just like a really windswept melody. Instead, we get a very understated and subdued, darker sounding song. Dark because I don't really think it's as happy as she says it is for the reason that it wasn't a Lust for Life. That's not to say it's necessarily a dark song lyrically, because it's an unencumbered love song. That's a word I'm using a lot in this video. There are just certain words I run with, pardon me. No More Candle in the Wind, references again. Elton, get your coin. You'd make a lot of money from Lana. You make me feel invincible, just like I wanted. It's not like I'm invisible. We did it for fun. We did it for free. I did it for you. You did it for me. We did it for the right reasons. And that's where the melody really stands out, is that one part of the chorus. In a quote for Elle magazine, she says, even though each person in the relationship changes, they don't change in ways that would make the relationship come to an end. I think it's a beautiful way to describe, the influx and outflux, the circadian rhythms of life and love. Because you have to accept change. Change is going to come. She sings about, how inevitably spring will come to fall, winter will come to spring. The allusion to Yosemite, beyond being just like a romantic, John Muir kind of evocative title, I guess is alluding to that sort of thing because, Yosemite looks so gorgeous throughout every single season. I've had a calendar where it's like had pictures of Yosemite in the winter, and then I've seen it like the snow melt to spring and summer and fall. Yet there's that iconic image of the waterfall. All seasons, Yosemite is one of those like landmark crown jewel national park of the United States. There's a lot of patriotism attached to Yosemite National Park, largely because it was one of the first national parks, if not the first. I can't remember if it was the first. I think it was the first, or was it Yellowstone? I always forget if Yellowstone or Yosemite came first, or if I'm completely off base and Yosemite is more like the eighth national park or something. Please correct me in the comments if I am wrong. But anyway, Yosemite has been, used in that way, and I think that that's sort of where she's going for with using it as the title, even though she does not reference it at all in the song directly. She also sings about, in the bridge, like how she remembers watching How Green Was My Valley. Then I was thinking, how deep was the canyon that you came from? Television static was quite overwhelming. Was it because of the cabin and the candles and the wind? Brilliant naturalistic metaphors for a dark, past that people are coming from. How deep was the canyon that you came from? Oh, girl, you have no idea. Alrighty. Breaking up slowly. Now, a lot of people were probably surprised upon first hearing this, thinking, that's not Lana singing. Who is this? That's singer Nikki Lane, who is for some reason on like Apple Music and such, not featured officially on the song, which I don't quite understand because she's pretty fun. She's pretty prominent, especially in the first half, and then they duet together during the chorus. This is a good old country breakup song. It sounds like a cover to me because the melody sounds so. I don't want to say it doesn't sound like Lana wrote it, but it's a very distinctly country melody. And Lana has always a little bit more, her melodies are always a little bit more, they take a little longer to get to where they're going. And this song is just like cuts right to it. It's very simplistic in that way. Breaking up slowly is a hard thing to do. I love you only, but it's making me blue. So don't send me flowers like you always do. It's hard to be lonely, but it's the right thing to do. When a relationship is crumbling, you need to listen. You need to read the tea leaves. I don't want to end up like Tammy Wynette. I actually don't know a whole lot about that woman. I know that she is a famous country singer, but I don't really get the reference that she is coming forward with that. We might be breaking up. George got arrested out on the lawn. We might be breaking up after this song. Like there's a real, yeah, I can't tell you how country this sounds. And it's a very interesting departure for her, but it's what I expected from this record. It's honestly what I expected. It's probably one of the songs that sounds the most like what I expected this album to sound like. Along with Wild at Heart, those two songs, they seem to really encapsulate that. Dance Till We Die. This is one that definitely needs to grow on me because on first listen, it was the one song along with White Dress, though, like I said, because White Dress was the first song on the record, I had, fresh eyes for it. Didn't feel bogged down by the, same sounding kind of stuff going on. But when we get to the penultimate track, I'm losing it a little bit. What really sells it is the change up she has in the bridge where she suddenly goes very country rock. Like a classic 70s, 60s rock song. I went down to Woodside. I left Berkeley, out of city, out of mind. Killing it, talking shit. Joan said she was going to quit, tearing it up at the Afro-Caribbean two-step. I left San Francisco. I've been covering Joni and I'm dancing with Joan. It's hard to find love when you're used to rolling like a Rolling Stone. She's just throwing all those references in there. I think she also references Stevie on this song, Stevie Nicks. Stevie is calling on the telephone. Court almost burned down my home. So Stevie Nicks and Courtney Love, I guess she's referring to. And I guess there's a story there about Courtney Love coming to her house and maybe lighting too many candles or something. I'm sure that's a interesting story she's using. And Joan is referenced, Joan Baez. She's a folk singer, a very famous folk singer. And then, of course, Joni, she's referencing Joni Mitchell. And, of course, the Rolling Stones. She's referenced them a million times in her music. But it's just an interesting song lyrically. I think that, like, it's a kind of tying it all together, keeping the positive, keeping on the sunny side, keeping it positive, keeping the dance going, doing that Louisiana two-step despite the world falling apart, those kind of vibes, which makes it sound like something off of Lust for Life, maybe a little bit. When the world was at war, we kept dancing. Vibes comes through this song. But like I said, what really sells it is that change up with the vocals. I mean, she goes down and raspy and growly, and it's just like, who is this woman? That's Lana? It is Lana. Okay. I hear you, Lana. Like, that's interesting. And also that swell that we get, and then we won't say when, we won't ask why. Like, I love how that swells with that orchestral riff. It's just like very, very beautiful. This song is growing on me with repeated listens for sure. Okay, and then the closing track. She often does include a cover on all of her records. In fact, Lust for Life was the only album she has put out that doesn't have a cover. Well, Lust for Life and Born to Die. Born to Die didn't have a cover either. All of her other albums have had at least one prominent cover of a famous song. For those who are not familiar, For Free is a song off of the 1970 album Ladies of the Canyon by Joni Mitchell. And I had to re-listen to it. I'd only actually heard it like once before years ago and I gotta be honest with you, Lana really sells it. It makes me like really appreciate that song now. I skipped over it for some reason and I didn't think of it as like one of Joni's best, but now I'm like, no, this is one of Joni's best songs. So it's made me fall in love with the original, but I also really do love this version. And we do have two featured vocalists. We have Zella Day, who is in the first verse, and then Wise Blood, who is in the third verse. Lana is in the second. And so they all play off of each other beautifully. I think they all sound wonderful on this. The change up in vocals is so welcoming. The piano, I mean, Joni's pianos. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's something I wish Lana played more with. We get a little bit of piano on White Dress, and then we get some on this song. We don't get actually quite a whole lot of piano on the rest of the record. So I would have really loved to have seen some more piano coming in through there. You know, for those who aren't aware that this is a cover, they might think of this song as a little out of place or a little left field. Because the lyrics, you know, are singing about, you know, from Joni's perspective, you know, meeting a busker on the street who, you know, she actually feels is probably making even better music than she is, but, you know, he doesn't do it for any money at all or barely any money. It's purely about the music for him. It's about the hustle. It's about the vibe. And she's reflecting on that with her own career. And obviously most musicians can relate. So it perfectly suits Lana's wheelhouse to sing about. And it's just, oh, it's such a romantic song about a concept that is unique and a story and the way of telling it that is it's so perfect in the way that Lana is continuing the arc of storytelling that Joni became so well known for. And other artists like her, the singer-songwriters of the 20th century who just paved the way for where Lana is today. And it's a perfect tribute. And I think a great way to end out the album, similar to how she ended, you know, Honeymoon with Nina Simone cover, and same with Ultraviolence. And she's just really good at ending albums. She had, you know, the Sublime cover on Norman. She's really good at picking these iconic songs from the 20th century and just giving them the spotlight they deserve. And she's not changing it up. She's not reinventing the song, but there's nothing wrong with that. Some people don't like that. There's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. If you can sing it really well, even if you're getting some of the inflections the same, go ahead, run with it, girl. Just give us that spirit. Continue the spirit of that song because it deserves to be passed on and reheard for future generations. But I do recommend listening to the original if you have not, because it is equally beautiful. I'm not sure which I prefer more, but very beautiful, both of them. And that closes out the record. Leaves a little bit to be desired. Like I said, thematically, I feel like the whole kind of like 1950s aesthetic is obviously the overtone of all of her music. So maybe it's a little presumptuous for me to ask for more from that. I feel like the title Chemtrails Over the Country Club really only pertains to the title song, not so much the rest of the record, but that's okay. Some of her other albums are like that. You know, it doesn't necessarily always have to pertain to everything and be so cohesive, because it is a cohesive record sonically with pockets of some real experimentalism that, you know, I was expecting, but I also didn't know what to expect. It was like at this stage in her career, I see her just getting more and more stripped back, going a little bit more into the folk Americana genre, a little bit less away from pop music. Every album, she seems to be stepping more and more away from that. And, well, she kind of returned a little bit to that with Lust for Life, but then that was just a weird veer back into that direction. But she's been otherwise sort of, you know, going in all these other different directions with rock, country, alternative, folk. And I see that continuing, you know. I don't know where she goes from here. I do think that, but yeah, this is a gorgeous album that is going to take time to get under people's skin. Is it as strong as Norman? Okay, you know, I was impressed. I think the low expectations kind of made me go, wow, this is a lot more than I was expecting. And the low expectations does kind of come from the fact that the two lead singles, particularly Let Me Love You Like a Woman, had just very little replay value for me. Not so much Chemtrails, but that song, I was like, oh yeah, that song came out. It was more about the controversy than there was anything to talk about with that song. But you know, Lana's singles are not always the strongest songs on a record. You know, it's not always that case for her album. So I came in with low expectations. You know, I kind of assumed that they were going to be the melodies weren't really going to be hitting me, and they do. They're very understated though, and there's no one song that like is like jumping out to me to be replayed over and over, but I think as a full album, it's definitely high on the replay list. It's just there aren't as many songs that I want to cherry pick and listen to over and over again. It's one of those albums. It's short enough. You just listen to all of it. You take all of it or nothing. It's kind of how I feel about this record. Lana deserves the critical acclaim. I've seen some very good reviews. Some of her highest of her career, and then, you know, some more just like what you would expect. Like, you know, it's good, but it's nothing extraordinary kind of reviews. But no, people are enjoying it. And it's, you know, I don't know if it's going to get her the same kind of Grammy acclaim. I could see the Grammys going for it. If they went for Norman, why wouldn't they go for this? But we'll see, you know. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how this has in its shelf life, how it progresses for us. But I hope you enjoyed this review, and leave your comments what your thoughts are on this record. Are you here for the production? Like I said, Jack Antonoff, I'm a real fan of yours when you produce Lana projects. When you work with Taylor Swift, I see you, but it doesn't suit it quite the same. Doesn't suit it quite the same for me. You and Lana together, it's a match made in heaven. I could see Jack working on every single Lana record moving forward. I would not complain. Rick Knowles, too. He does a good job as well. But yeah, anyway, okay. That all being said, I hope you enjoyed this review. In the comments, discuss your favorites. What are your least favorites? My favorites, definitely Tulsa Jesus Freak, the title track, For Free, obviously, because it's the Joni cover that's gorgeous. And Wild at Heart probably is the other highlight. I want to give Yosemite that as well. It's just not jumping off the page the same way as I'd like it to. Even though there is something so magical about that song, it's going to grow on me. It's going to grow on me. Don't think by any means I'm dissing that song. It's also a highlight. But like I said, White Dress, Let Me Love You Like a Woman, Dance Till We Die, particularly those first two songs are my least favorites. But in the context of the whole album, I get it. It's a short enough album I can abide them and I don't feel the need to skip them. I hope you all enjoyed this review. I will see you all in my next one. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. Peace, love, and light. Bye.